Hello and welcome to Project Insight's Professional Development Series. Today we have part 3 of 5 designed to help you manage projects with greater success. Today we're covering schedule. A few reminders, everyone will be on mute. If you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. In fact, feel free to say hi there now. Maybe let us know how your summer's starting off. I'm in Phoenix and it is hot. This session is valid for 1 hour of PDU. You will receive a link to that before the end of the week. The key is you need to stay until the end of today's session, right, to fill out the request form. But I want to introduce you to our experts. We have Steve West. For more than 2 decades, he has helped thousands of organizations make their work life easier through project management as the founder and CEO of Project Insight.
Hey, thanks, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Project Insight, if you're not familiar, we're an award-winning online project management tool. Our mission is to automate your work, unify your data, and make your life easier. Please reach out. We'd love to work with you. With Steve, we have Diane Buckley-Alwies. Diane has more than 3 decades of project management experience throughout multiple industries. She's an author, a speaker, a consultant. We are extremely fortunate, as always, right? I can't believe it's already 3. This is proof that time does fly when you're having fun. But we're very fortunate to be learning from you both again today. Hi, guys.
Hey, guy. Hey, Matt.
Hello.
How are you? Hey, Steve.
Welcome. Let's get this going.
All right. So, welcome everybody. This is our 3rd session of the 5 keys to managing any project. And as for those of you who've been here with us, and I think most of you have, we've been through the charter. We spent a lot of time talking about stakeholders last month, and this month we're going to be talking about scheduling. And one of the things or several of the things that you're going to learn in this session is, how do we define the work? How do we put the work in order of it that needs to be done? Trying to determine how long something will take to complete, how long your project is, and what is a realistic schedule. And I'm going to add one other thing in here, as many of you are working in kind of an agile environment. We're going to bring in that concept a little bit later in the session, but recognize that you still need to understand the work that needs to be done. You still need to put it in somewhat of an order, and you still need to know how long it's going to take. I don't think any company that we work for will say, oh, by the way, take as long as you need to get something done. They're going to ask you, when do you think it's going to be done? Right, Steve?
Yeah. Let's move the slide forward.
Sure.
And just talking about scheduling, many people that we work with, sometimes, if they're not a professional project management organization, they maybe don't even, they don't have schedule, they don't have the work, they don't keep track of that. So,
right.
And especially lately with people that use our Jira integration or DevOps, they're just keeping track of the things to do, and they're not even, many clients don't take the time to do the estimation of the effort part. And right. I think, like you said, even if you're doing agile or you're doing sprints, you do need to know how much effort it is one way or another, whether you're using, traditional methods or the t-shirt sizes and story points and things like that. How if you don't have some sense of that, you're not going to get the capacity or information that most executives want to get. And I think, hey, Diane, I think you're sharing just the first screen.
I am. All right, something happened here. Hold on one second. Let me try this again.
Also, right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for sharing where everyone's from. I'm glad the sun's out for you, Karen. That's wonderful. So,
why is it not doing? Hold on, I apologize. Something happened. Let's bring this back.
Yeah, it happens. This is part of, it's part of the Zoom world.
I was certainly going forward with all the slides.
I know, right?
And everything else. You guys just didn't see it. So give me 1 second here. Something happened. It's showing that it's presenting. There we go. Let's try this again.
Yeah. If you don't, I can do it.
Can you see it now?
We see the first slide.
All right.
There we go. Now you're talking.
All right. Little technical difficulty here. So I think we're back. All right. So yeah, to what your point was, Steve, is we can't get away from communicating how long something's going to take. And when we were, 3 months ago, we talked about the charter, and the charter has all that information in it. Like, what are the expectations of that project? When do they want it done? What are some of those measurable objectives? So you can't get away from it. So scheduling is important regardless of where, the methodology you're using within your organization. So we're going to kind of look more at this like very pure scheduling concepts. And then we'll have further conversations with regard to the agile methodology. But the reality is you got to understand the big picture, which comes from your charter, and then break it down into manageable chunks. And that's the term called decomposing. It's kind of a little macabre, but anyway, but that's what you're doing. You're decomposing the work into smaller, more manageable chunks. Even if you're going to say, I'm going to break it up into 3 sprints, then what's in those sprints?
Yeah.
But how do you get to what work needs to be done? And you get to what work needs to be done by, having a conversation, having a brainstorming session. Many of us, have gone through these sessions, and sticky notes are a wonderful thing. Basically, you just get in a room with all the people that need to think through what has to be done, and you start identifying all those deliverables. You throw them up on the wall, make sure, kind of brainstorm everything. And then what comes out of that conversation is maybe a little more clarity about what doesn't belong, and you can take those out, and a little bit more clarity about the types of work that you're going to do and how you want to group them and measure them. It can be done in phases like this particular example here, or it could be done in more functional areas. So you want to be able to say, okay, here's all the work that we think we're going to do, and here's how I want to break it up. And we know that, I'm pretty sure Steve, but most of us know that you're never going to think of everything. And there will be things that happen during the course of the project that will add work, maybe take some work away. But most of the time it's adding some work. So don't expect to be perfect. It's about getting kind of a rough plan out there of the things that you're going to do.
And I've done this exercise before, with clients, and been part of it as well when I'm, maybe when I was a software engineer for people. And one of the techniques I've seen project managers do, like, let's say you're doing a really big project that has a lot of things that are really complicated. I've seen the team get broken down into the teams, and having somebody be responsible for one. You mentioned functional area, being responsible for a specific functional area, and getting the steps from your people. And so you don't have to do that yourself as a project manager and figuring it all out. So
right. And what's one of the benefits of doing that? Let
teamwork.
let the people that are doing the work say what they have to do.
Yeah.
I probably won't know exactly what they have to do and how much work it will take or how much time it will take. You really need to have the people that are in there doing the work, giving you that insight.
Well, and I think when you do that, you get more buy-in to the schedule itself than if you're just putting the schedule together. Because obviously, as project managers, one of the things that I find is difficult is that you always need usually the date that you're supposed to be done with something is set before you know what you're really even doing. So
yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Like, how many of us were dictated a date to finish?
Pretty much, that's how it goes.
Yeah, everybody should raise their hand, right? Right?
It's always that way. Well, because I think people want to be optimistic. You don't want to be pessimistic. So I think that's where it's really hard for project managers, because you get squeezed to meet. You don't want to be pessimistic either. So you do need to be fair in terms of to the people in the team and to the executives or whomever you're answering to, like, what's realistic.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a hard thing to do, and so if you get into the mode of really kind of having that exercise early on, what I don't recommend, is, we're just going to tackle this first thing and we're not going to think about anything else. All right. I don't recommend that, because that will drag out the project, almost guarantee it. So you do need to take some time, really think through, look at the whole project, identify your major things that you want to do, subdivide them a bit, look at some dependencies here. We're going to talk about dependencies a little bit more too. But, think about what really needs to come first and why, so you can help, orchestrate the work that needs to be done. To your point, Steve, make sure your team and their stakeholders get input into this. I'm not going to be able to know everything that needs to be done. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were asking me, can we do this within our system? And I'm like, conceptually, yeah, but I don't have that expertise to tell you, how difficult that is, but conceptually, yes, I can answer that question. And then number 5 here is you have to update as you go along. And we've talked about that in our other 2 sessions as well, this is a living, breathing, opportunity for you and your organization to deliver something, right? And we can't expect that we know everything from the beginning. We can't expect that things won't change. We can't expect that we won't hit some hurdle or speed bump that slows us down, or something drastic could happen, like, COVID, right? I mean, that affected a lot of projects. So you got to realize that it is going to be updated as you go along.
Definitely. And also, a lot of times you don't want to take the time. You're like, let's just do the work. But then if you don't spend some of your time on the planning, it gets harder down the road.
Yeah. I'm on this one project right now. It's a whole UI change.
Mm-hmm.
And the technical team has always done exactly that, Steve, is, we got an idea. Let's start. No. Time out.
Right.
We're gonna kind of look through the whole thing, and we're gonna work in an agile environment, but we are gonna do more design, more review of those designs, maybe get some client feedback before we start doing that development work. So so planning, you can't get away from planning to be most successful, and that's of the mantra here.
In software, like we tend to go really a million miles an hour, but like if your team spends time doing something like that you don't really need, or maybe they do it wrong, you end up adding, it doesn't feel like you're adding more time to your project, but you really end up doing more work in the long run.
Yep.
And I think just getting like you said before, the sticky notes, even for software projects, getting things together so that your engineers are going to work on the same kinds of things can really help a lot.
Yep. And help definitely helps in how you allocate all the resources to work on whatever you're going to work on. So a couple other terms that I want to make sure everybody understands. So there's a term called work breakdown structure. So it's just a hierarchical kind of look at, how the work is going to roll up and deliver on the end product. And a deliverable is something that is very concrete. And I just found a typo, but something very concrete. And we had the conversation about objectives and having SMART objectives. So you can apply that concept of specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely to your deliverable as well. What am I delivering? I am delivering, this piece of code that's going to do, A, B, and C. And, at the end, I can test, that it achieved what it's supposed to do. So you want to have some sort of success criteria for every deliverable. It can't be write a paper, it can't, it can't be deliver a dashboard. Right. What does that mean? Right. I could see lots of different things. So you want to be very specific in those deliverables, which helps you be able to estimate those deliverables a lot more. So again, it takes time to really be specific and get that in writing to be able to hand it off to somebody to do.
Definitely.
So we'll talk through a little example here today. And the first thing I did my sticky note stuff. I organized my sticky notes, and I came up with 4 categories. So we're talking about a children's charity. We talked about the charity in the last session as well. And so there's things that need to be done. So in this particular example, we wanted to make sure we did a feasibility study on the event that we were trying to do. And that was going to be part of our planning for this charity event. We knew logistically we're going to have to recruit volunteers, and we're going to have to coordinate with local agencies. Then we said, okay, well, now we want to promote this thing. Who are we marketing to? How do we get sponsors? What is our PR campaign going to look like? What event vendors do we want there? And then the day of the event, how are we going to train the volunteers? How are we going to set up the event? And what happens in holding the event? And again, these are very high level, and you keep breaking it down to further and further granularity. And that's what that work breakdown structure is. So you need to kind of think about it this one's more functional. You could break it up in just more phases, which would be more aligned with like a sprint, but you're still having the same deliverables, whether you organized it by sprint or you organized it by function.
Yeah, and that's in Project Insight. You can definitely build your work breakdown structure any way you want, with what we call summary tasks. Microsoft Project does it that way too. So when you go back to the sticky note, thinking about that, have you ever done it where you decide on the top level things and then put your sticky notes in those buckets first? Like, do you just get everything on the wall, or do you put them
usually
on the
just
wall
throw it all on the wall? And then you throw it on the wall and then sit back and take a look at it and see how you want to kind of approach it. You might have conversations about dependencies. You might have conversations about resources. You might have conversations about, like for example, it's like, oh, we don't have anybody in this company that can do that, so that might, be like, okay, well, we're going to handle that one in a different way. We've got to get HR involved. We got to find a resource, so just throw it up on the wall. Don't assume any order when you're starting it. And this doesn't even assume any order right now. So all we're doing is we've identified the work. We've organized the work so that it rolls up. In this case, let's just use promotion as an example. There's 4 deliverables, okay? If I have it grouped this way, I can see that if I get 2 of the deliverables done, maybe I'm 50% done. I can see my progress. So you want to organize it in a way that you want to see progress, so that you can see that percent complete. And I'll flip over to kind of the sprint kind of methodology. It's the same kind of thing. You've got different sprints. You're going to put work into the sprints, and by the end of that sprint, you're expecting to be 100% done. So you can see progress. So that's one of the benefits of Agile. It forces you to define the work in a time frame so that you know that you're going to be done with that work at the end of that sprint. So this is similar. I've defined the work by function, and this is basically telling me when I will be done with promotion when all 4 things are done. But it doesn't show it. It's not right. Over time. So the intent is you're grouping things so that you can show progress. All right. So this is an example of a work breakdown structure of what we were just talking about, and how visually you can see it. It's a good way to, show to people that are not involved in the project of all the things that are going to be done and how they roll up and where they belong. So a work breakdown structure is one view of all the work to be done. There's several things that we're going to go through today. The next thing you do is you want to basically sequence those activities. And that's putting all those activities in order that they're going to be done. So, can they be done at the same time? So you're going to start having conversations about, can I do them at the same time? Do I have the resources to be able to do them? Do I have any delays that might cause me to not start something till later on? So you're going to have conversations about sequencing of activities. Did you want to say something, Steve?
No, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I mean, it gets challenging sometimes to do all that.
And we've all probably experienced things where we start working on a task and we realize, oh, wait a minute, I can't finish this until I get this from somebody else. And then that throws your whole schedule off. We probably all have put something into a sprint that all of a sudden you realize, wait a minute, I need something else.
Well, and I recommend not worry. Like sometimes people get stuck trying to sequence things and they're like, well, I don't know. And then it becomes a roadblock. I think just go with what you think is best at the time and then don't worry about it. Come back to it if they're make adjustment later.
Yeah.
A lot of times clients, they don't know what the sequence should be. So we always just kind of work through that if we're helping build templates or project plans to just make your best guess.
Well, and that's the general thing is like, you've got to start somewhere, right? You got to, make it something that's realistic, something that seems to make sense, and you're going to identify things during the course of the project that will modify the schedule. I mean, has anybody in this audience ever had a schedule that never changed? Right? Anybody?
No, there's no possible, no way.
That sounds nice.
All you had to do is one task.
I know. Well, now you don't have a project.
That's true. It's not a project.
So, the bigger the project, the more you're not going to be correct.
Right.
So.
Well, yeah. And so some additional terms, if something has to be done before I do certain pieces of work, we're going to call that a predecessor. For those of you that are project managers on this audience, these are terms that you should already know, right? But those that are new, these are things that you're going to want to know. And if something that happens after a specific task, it's called a successor. And if it can be done at the same time, it can be done in parallel. So the reason I bring that up is because once you identify all your activities, you're going to want to identify what's possible from a predecessor and a successor and a parallel standpoint. So this just gives an example, for those that might be new to this concept. You have to say things like the volunteers must be trained before the gates are open to the event, because we say we got to train the volunteers, but you probably don't want to train the volunteers halfway through the event, right? So again, some logical dependencies have to, will come out of this. And sometimes it seems awful obvious, but you'd be surprised how many times you have these conversations of, where things should fit. And here's one for you, Steve. The website software must be developed before it can be tested, right? It's kind of like, duh, right? So the software development is going to be a predecessor. So there's natural predecessors and successors that you and your industry will define, and that will somewhat be repeatable from project to project. So it's not like you have to reinvent the wheel every single time. I ended up getting, kind of a general project schedule that things just naturally fell into. And then the uniquenesses of the project.
Yeah, and that's why we have project templates in our tool, so that you can put your templates in, and then you don't have to start from scratch every time you build a new project. And I think that's, what's nice about the way we implement the templates is that if you can actually, in our tool, update the template and then push that change down into your active projects that reflect that template. So,
that's cool.
There's being online, it gives you some advantages, but definitely that's something you want to spend more time on, is defining what your processes are that you repeat a lot. So that when you if you do the same project a lot of times, you don't have to do it manually every time.
Right. I mean, projects are going to be different, are always going to be different. And the main reason they're always going to be different is you're probably going to have different people involved. So you can do the exact same project with two different clients and have two totally different experiences. We talked about stakeholders last month, right? So if you've got a client stakeholder that's like super, super engaged, you may have a nice, easy, experience with dealing with them. But if you've got a client that's disengaged and you're always having to do extra work to get them engaged, your project's going to look very different, even though the structure might be the same from project to project.
Yeah, or maybe there's if you're doing the same thing, you might have some overlap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Similar tasks.
Absolutely. And maybe use the same resources, and that would be awesome, right? They can, economies of scale, do the same thing. So this slide here talks about the different types of dependencies. So even though we know that there's dependencies out there, there's different types of dependencies. So there's things that are mandatory, like the walls must be built before you can put the roof on the house, right? Then there's things that are discretionary that you want to have in a particular order, but it's not necessarily cast in concrete. So, most of the time we're going to want to make sure we have a contract signed before we start the project. But, I've experienced that sometimes you get that little gentleman's handshake and the project got started, but the contract's still in process, so that's more of a discretionary thing. External dependencies, you may not have control over everything. Like I said, maybe we don't have a resource to do a particular task, and I might have to go find a resource external to the organization. And what's their availability? Can I have somebody available to do it when I need it? And then the last one is internal dependencies. How do you normally run your projects and stuff? So in the example here, communication of the new employee healthcare program cannot be released until approved by legal department. So I can have some internal dependencies that force some constraints on my project. So knowing that there's different types of dependencies, you can act differently. So I have different options if something's external. I might have different options if it's an internal dependency. I may not have any options if it's mandatory. So there's things you can do, and you can reset your schedule, knowing the type of dependency that you're dealing with. So once we have those dependencies and we have the tasks, we can put a task list together. So, all right, we've been talking for 30 minutes and we're finally getting our task list together, right? So we've done our brainstorming, we've thought about our needs, we've grouped them in logical groupings, and we've decided how they should be, what are my dependencies? So this is a very simple way to identify those tasks. And on the right-hand side, you see the different predecessors. We do it all in terms of predecessors. And then within the system, within Project Insight, you can identify those dependencies. And that's what builds your network diagram and ultimately our Gantt chart, which we're going to show you here in a little bit. But the first step is the network diagram, which now takes all of those tasks and puts them in order. And this is a different view than what we talked about, the work breakdown structure. So you can very clearly see the things that can be done in parallel, the things that have to be done in a sequence, the things that come first and the things that come last. Whereas in a task list, you can't see that. And even in the work breakdown structure, you can't see that. A network diagram gives you that visibility. And what this doesn't show, which we'll see shortly, is that duration and the length of time. But this gives you a way to see what can be done at the same time, or things that have to be done in a particular sequence.
Yeah, and I think typically for this, if you have a project with a ton of tasks, usually you're going to do this at a higher level. Isn't that correct?
Yes and no. I mean, I've literally seen, and this is old school, work breakdown structures that fill the whole wall.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a large program, lots of things going on, filling the entire wall with, what's happening now and each of the tasks. So it depends on how you like to work. Again, that's a little bit more old school, but they can get very complicated. They can get very complicated. And then lastly, what we want to do is we want to talk about the term effort and duration. So a lot of times people will ask, so how long is it going to take? And somebody might say, well, I can do that in a couple hours. Right. Well, that doesn't mean that they're going to start it today. It means, I don't know yet. So you have to ask that question. So if it's going to take me 2 hours to do something, the next question is, you want to say, okay, when can you start it? and when can you finish it? Now, most of us have lots of things on our plate, so even 2 hours might be difficult to get one block of time of 2 hours. So you might get, I can start it on Monday and I'll have it done by Friday, even though it's only supposed to be 2 hours. My effort is 2 hours, but my duration is 5 days. So it's really important to understand both, because what you will put from an accountability standpoint to your user, there'll be two things. It'll be, how much time did they say it was going to take? And then how much time did it really take them? So from a budgeting standpoint, you want to know that. And then how long did it take them to finish it?
Mm-hmm.
Did they stay within the week that they said they were going to stay? And
and this gets really hard because most people have more than one project going on at a time.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things where the sprints and stuff does kind of help people manage their week, because they're not supposed to commit to doing anything unless they can get it done within that sprint. And they're held accountable for getting it done within the sprint. I think that's the big difference between like a waterfall approach and a sprint approach, because people are signing up to get it done. And there's a lot less, there's a lot more, how I want to put it, there's a lot more pressure in a sprint process to get it done in the sprint.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
and that's why, Project Insight traditionally in the beginning was a waterfall based tool, but why we have added sprint capabilities and agile capabilities in the tool is so that you can take a waterfall project and then carve out a part of it, or even in our tool, you can even take more than one project at a time and carve out several tasks out of each of those projects and develop a sprint for
Right.
the two projects together, or n number of projects.
Right. And I think you're going to show us that later, right?
Yeah.
Because we briefly talked about it, I think 2 months ago. So we're going to get a chance to really see that. No, I think that's great, because I think most of us, if not all of us, are working in somewhat of a hybrid model anyway, right? Management is never going to tell you, like I said earlier, management is never going to tell you, oh, take all the time in the world, just get it done whenever you can. Right? That's not going to happen. Not in my lifetime.
So it's actually the opposite. Is more and more,
right.
more and more people are trying to do more with less.
Right.
So.
Right. And you just can't, you just can't do that. So there has to be some level of constraints around the project, which is more traditional. But then how do you organize your work, and how do you more efficiently get your work done? And if you have teams that are working, on these projects together, putting them into a sprint process and a sprint cadence makes them more focused on the work at hand, and in theory makes them more efficient. All right. I don't know if the jury's still totally out on that, but we'll get there. But that's the theory, and I see it work well, and you've seen it work well. But you're always having to kind of refine and do your retrospectives and continue to make improvements, because we're not perfect, right? So knowing effort and duration is important on every single task. We do not schedule by effort. We schedule by duration, because if you scheduled by effort, you will never hit your targets, right? So you definitely schedule by duration, but it is important within each of the tasks to know what that effort commitment was, and that's how you're going to plan how much work you can get done within a sprint. All right. So I'm going to hand it over to you. And let's see what the system can show us.
Sure.
You got it, Steve?
Oh, thought I was sharing my screen, but maybe not.
Matt's going to hold us accountable. So now I don't feel
right? Listen here, stakeholders. I have to have a difficult conversation here.
I know, right?
There we go.
I didn't plan my project that well here. So what you're looking at here, and we talked earlier about, the dependencies and, effort versus duration. A Gantt chart shows you the duration of your task. Obviously, these two tasks here they're over several weeks in this particular example. They're this could be a 5-hour task. It could be a 20-hour task. But
Hmm.
the Gantt chart's really designed to show you what your schedule is. And you can see this task happens first, and then this one happens second. Conduct systems, this is the predecessor. Create new plans is the successor. And this has what's called a finish to start relationship. And in our tool, you can make these relationships really easily. You can see I already have a bunch set up, but you can just drag onto here, and then that created that dependency between these tasks, and you can see it automatically schedules it after. Same thing here. If I want install systems to happen before the add new feature into the software, I can just drag down here, and now I have like a traditional waterfall going on here.
Oh, wow. Very cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the Gantt chart, its purpose is, as you said, it shows your schedule,
Hmm.
and it's really meant to show progress. So as things get
Right.
completed, this is the tool that you want to be able to show to
Hmm.
see how you're progressing to the original schedule.
Correct. And in a traditional task list, you can do predecessors here as well. So in this view, I have the same work breakdown structure with what, again, these are the same hierarchies. You can make it any structure you want, but over here you can say these predecessors, number 2, number 3, you can't see it as easily, the relationships, but you can set them here. And then
Hmm.
of course you can actually look at it this way. Um, you can edit that right in this view. So here's the task number in the work breakdown structure, what its predecessor number is. So this is task number 4 happens after 3, task number 5 happens after 4, and so on and so forth. It's just easier to see it in this view here, but
Yeah,
it is available in both views.
yeah, well, every one of those tools, they all it's all the same data, right?
Yeah.
And you use the different tool based on what you're trying to show. So,
Hmm.
if you want to show all the tasks, you have a task
Right.
list, right? If you want to show, just dependencies, you would use like a network diagram. If you want to show
Mhm.
the relationship of the tasks to the different functional areas, you might want to show a work breakdown structure.
Right.
But most of us, you're going to want to show progress. And so that's why the Gantt chart becomes like probably the most popular one
Hmm.
to use. But those other tools are the same data, just a
Right.
different view, right?
Right.
And you're going to want to use them for different purposes.
Right. And then we talked a little bit about sprints. You can see here I added a column in this view to show what sprint we're adding these tasks in. Let's say we want to do this chunk of tasks in a sprint. We can edit it right here and choose what sprint this is going to be. That's one way to do it.
Hmm.
But the other way is just to go over to the sprint, and you can see what we've done here is created a sprint with, this is our main project we were in, but we also included 2 other projects we're doing at the same time. At the bottom here is the combined backlog of things that we could add into the sprint. If I want to do develop widget that comes from my project, or maybe I need to do make corrections in this other project, I can just add this into the sprint by hitting the plus key, and now it's going to become part of that sprint. And so what
And
you're looking at now is just a mini project, basically, like what you're talking about.
And what I really like about that capability within Project Insight is, the ability to have that hybrid kind of model where
Mhm.
you've got the traditional um, uh, project schedule that shows things over time with
Right.
and you can show the sprints, but that sprint is really a subset of what's
Yeah.
happening in the background with your engineers, and they're working on multiple projects in a sprint,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
But I can see just my piece as the project manager on this project,
Right.
and I'm not getting all that extra noise of somebody else's work. I can still see my project independently, and I think that's awesome, because
That's
I
what
think
this.
that's how
Yeah. Right.
most
Basically.
companies are working today.
Yeah. Basically, this sprint is your goal for the next week or the month or
Mhm.
whatever your sprint period is. You're looking at just its own progress of this slice of your 3 or 4 projects. This is actually 3 projects going on. We've created a mini project within those 3 projects, and as this work gets done in here, it's the same exact task, so it gets routed to the person, and all the things our tool
Not
does with
duplicating
collaboration.
data entry
Exactly.
or anything, which is
Yeah.
When they mark it done here, it gets marked done in the regular project. And this gives you, when you're having your Scrum meetings, you can get your team together, show them here's how much we've done. And we have, we have a burn down chart that people expect here as well, or this is as the work gets done. It just lets you create a mini project or a sprint of these are some harder goals. You don't have to go look into 3 or 4 projects to see what's going on at that one time. But let's say this project's my project, and Diane's doing this project and Matt's doing that project. We can all 3 look at the progress together, or we can go look at our individual projects and see,
right.
our progress here. So it's just a different way of thinking about things.
Yeah. No, it's great. Do we have any questions from the audience at this
Now, we
point?
didn't prompt them for very many questions in this
Oh, we
particular.
got a little bit more to go through, so we can
Yeah,
prompt
let's
them.
keep going.
Yeah. No, I mean, again, it's every project's going to be different, but the base building blocks of a successful project is making sure you're doing your planning, and it all starts with that charter, making sure that you're taking the time to think about the work that needs to be done. You don't, to our conversation earlier, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to get the big, deliverables defined, and then, continue to decompose that work as you get more and more involved in the project and learn more, and then making sure you're planning things appropriately with effort and duration and dependencies, and building that schedule. Now, one other thing that we might want to show, Steve, is the fact that projects, a lot of people set up their project schedules with a very kind of mandated dates. And what you really want is, as tasks get completed, even if a task is delayed, you want the project to automatically adjust. And a lot of people, I've seen a lot of people think that, I don't want it to adjust. I don't want to see it move. Like, for example, I didn't get my task done this sprint. And it was because I didn't realize there was another dependency. So once I put that new dependency in, now it moved the end date of my project out another week. I don't want to tell anybody that, right? I'm like, well,
Oh, you do want to tell them.
you do want to tell people that, right? I mean, that's the problem. It's, you do want to say that. I say that knowledge of that dependency now pushed out our schedule by a week. And I have some choices now. This is the value of the project manager, right? Project manager shouldn't be sitting there, pushed out a week. Let's just tell no. Now you go back to your network diagram, your dependencies. Is there anything I can do in the chain of tasks that have these relationships to help bring that in? Maybe there's a task later on that we planned, let's say 2 weeks of duration, but the effort was really only like 3 days. So maybe you talk to that
bring that back
resource.
like
Can I bring that in? So you want the tool to tell you that things got all messed up.
Yeah.
But the value of the project manager and what you're doing here in the scheduling activities is knowing where you have places that you can adjust to maybe respond to that push and bring it back in.
Right. And here on the Gantt chart, you can drag it out a little. So let's say it was supposed to start on the 3rd of October. Now it's going to be late. You can move it just like that on the Gantt chart and drag it back. Or you can adjust these things.
Right. And I mean, I think that's something that newer project managers need to get used to, is that you are there to help figure out how to get the work done in the time frame allotted. There's going to be times when you don't have that control, but there's going to be many times where you do, and you got to be creative on getting it there. And again, it comes down to, I think we can probably share my screen now. Comes down to really kind of balancing, the scope of the work, the quality of the work, your resources, your dependencies, how much time you have to get it done, your availability of your users. So this is the value of the project manager, in my opinion, that, we should raise that flag and be marching with. It's like, this is our job. Our job is to balance all that stuff going on to bring the best product based on the scope of work, based on the expectations in that charter, and delivering it successfully to the end, to whoever is your customer. So that's our scheduling session for today.
Yep. That was good.
Yeah. So
Wonderful.
we've done charter, we've done stakeholders, we've done schedule. Next month, we're going to talk about statusing. We talked a bit about that under stakeholders. We're going to get a little bit more in detail, and all the great tools that Project Insight has to help you status on your project. And then the following month, we'll do risks and issues. So looking forward to that. Do we have any questions out there?
No, I don't think we received any questions today, but we got a lot of highs from people.
Yeah, lots of engagement. Thank you everyone so very much. Again, subscribe if you have not already to our YouTube channel. Here is your code. So get out your phone and start scanning, right?
Mm-hmm. Be ready.
And then you do need to fill. There is a form there you have to fill out. I think that last time someone didn't realize they had to complete the form all the way through, because that's how we know who to send the PDU to and all of that.
And
so make sure you do that. But so any scheduling nightmares that you've had in the past while we wrap this up? Like
me?
Have any crazy projects? Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, again, when you're new and you don't, well, we'll talk about that on your risk management is,
right.
It's kind of like, if you've had the pain points, you don't do that again. Right. So I was always the super optimist, and I still am, but I always put some contingency in my schedules.
Right.
Make sure I have
build in a little bit of cushion on your durations.
Yep.
The other thing that we didn't talk about that much, but we could, is that when you're talking duration versus effort, if you're like most companies, your team resources are not just your exclusive.
Yeah, we wish they were, but they're not.
Yeah, they're not. That's just not the way it works anymore. Hardly ever.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about how much work something is going to take in the your project, you're going to want to give more duration. If it's an 8-hour task, you don't want to give them just a day to do it, because their chance of them sitting down and knocking something out in 8 hours is really unrealistic. And I didn't show this, but in Project Insight, there is an option to give your duration in and have it automatically calculate. Like, let's say you put a 5-day task in, you can say, I want for every day, I want to give 2 hours of work. So you can put a 5-day task in and it'll automatically pre-populate it with 10 hours, for example.
Just to give you that extra little cushion.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you know, like our tool used to say 1 day, 8 hours, but now you can actually configure it to say 1 day equals 2 hours. And that's just a nice thing for when you're entering your project plan and your task list to make it easier to do. Those are some settings that you may want to find in the project options area for those of you who are clients. I know there's some in there. I've seen you in there. So there's a way for you, and it can be set on a template or on each individual project. So like maybe one project you want 1 day to equal 1 hour, and another project you might want 1 day to equal 4 hours. So that's an area that you can do. And again, most people do give you duration and effort. The other thing is that you can also calculate duration in percent. We didn't talk much about that either, but those are some other ways.
A ton of, yeah. Again, in a 1 hour webinar, right?
No, I know.
Yeah, we're not going to teach them all those things, but no, that's great. There's a lot of extra features that Project Insight has available for to make the project manager's job a little bit easier.
Right, but it starts with the project manager you doing that process in the first place, because our tool can't do it unless you put it in. So, and no
Right.
tool can. So
Right.
it does start and end with all the content you learn here from Diane.
Awesome.
So
Awesome.
thanks a lot, everybody.
All right. Well, we have like we said, we have 2 more of the five keys series coming up. So July 19th and August 16th.
Yeah, great.
We'll see you
Looking
there.
forward to those.
All right. Well,
Okay,
thank you
thanks a
guys.
lot.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Matt. Thanks everybody
Thank
for joining us today.
Bye.